My father called me at 3:41 in the morning. I remember the number because I've been looking at that clock for 12 years. 3:41? Tuesday, the 17th of March. His voice was shaking. Honey, they're framing me. I sat up. I didn't turn on the light. 12 years in the army leaves one thing in you, and it isn't courage. It's this. When everything comes apart, you don't turn on the light. You sit up in the dark and you listen. Where are you? Sheriff's office. Pettis County. How long have you been there? He went quiet. He went quiet long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Dad? Since 2 this afternoon, he said. I looked at the clock. 3:41 in the morning. 13 hours. My father sat in a holding room for 13 hours before he dialed my number. I found out later what he did with those 13 hours. Not because he told me. My father doesn't tell you things. He just leaks them, one piece at a time, the way a man drops change without noticing. He sat there and tried to think of a way to handle it himself, so he wouldn't have to bother me. He only called at 3:41 because they'd just told him he was being transferred to county in the morning, and after that it would be too late. Don't sign anything, I said. Don't say anything else. I'm coming. You're in Delaware, sweetheart. I know where I am. There was a pause on that line, longer than it needed to be. Sloan, my father said. It's nothing to speak of. Then he hung up. I want you to hold on to that sentence. I didn't. I heard an old man being brave at 3 in the morning. I set it down, and I never picked it back up. It was the most important thing anybody said to me in 12 years, and I had it in my ear before the sun came up, and I did not hear it. I sat on the edge of the bed for another 90 seconds, not because I was in shock, because in those 90 seconds I understood something that 12 years of training never taught me how to carry. I knew exactly what they were using to frame my father. They were using my money. Here's the other thing you need before any of the rest of it, and it's the only brag in this story, so I'll get it over with now. That March, I was 41 years old, with $4,000 and a pickup truck. No house, no lawyer. Nobody in Sedalia, Missouri has ever once been afraid of me, and nobody ever should be. But there is a room in Dover, Delaware, and in that room they hand you a box. And the box is everything that is left of a person. And your job is to read it. Item by item. Out loud. 12 years I did that. I am better at it than almost anybody alive, and there is no way to say that sentence that doesn't sound like a brag or a sickness. Hold on to that one too. It took me 4 days, a courtroom, and a stranger's business card to remember I had it. If you've ever known a man like mine, a man who'd sit 13 hours in the dark rather than make a phone call that might inconvenience somebody, then this story belongs to him. Subscribe and turn on the bell. Because the quietest people are usually the ones who need somebody to speak up the most, and they will never once ask for it. I was in the truck by 10 minutes after 4. There was a flight at 6:15. I didn't take it. Not because I'm afraid of flying, not because I needed time to think, not for any reason that sounds good. I didn't take it because a one-way that close in was $460 and I had $4,200 in my account. I was 41 years old. I had $4,200 in a pickup truck. I'll explain that. 1,050 miles, 16 hours if you don't stop. I didn't stop. Somewhere past Indianapolis, my lower back started up. It does that around hour 6. 12 years of lifting things that can't help you lift them will do that to a person. The VA sent me a letter about it once, with a rating in it and a percentage. I put the letter in a drawer. I've never opened it. Remember that. It's the whole problem with me, and it only takes one sentence. On the passenger seat was a .50 caliber ammo can. Olive drab, rubber gasket, folding handle. The kind of can every soldier drags home, and nobody can explain why. Inside it were 47 postcards. My father hated the telephone. Hated it the way you hate something that once embarrassed you. He spent 38 years as a lineman, a whole life climbing poles, a whole life working on the wires that carry other people's voices across Missouri, and he could not stand to talk through one. On the phone, he sounded like a man reading a report. 3 sentences and gone. So he wrote. The first one came to Dover in April of 2014. I remember, because I assumed somebody had died. It said, Sloan, rain all week. Duke had ticks. Got him off. Dad? WM, he signed his initials on a postcard. To his daughter. Then a second. A third. About 4 a year, 12 years, 47 cards. Not one of them longer than 4 lines. Not one of them asked what I did for a living. Not one. I used to think that meant he didn't care. I was wrong about that. And I was wrong for 12 years. And I'll spend the rest of my life thinking about it. And I never emptied that can. That's worth saying too. I added to it. 4 times a year I put a card in the top and shut the lid. And the lid has a rubber gasket. And I had not seen the bottom of that can since 2010. An archivist who never audits her own holdings. I'd have written somebody up for that. Here's the part I have to say out loud, and I want you to understand I have never said it to anyone. Not the way people mean when they say that in stories. I mean 4,380 days and not once. My mother died in October of 2013. Cancer. 14 months. When it was finished, my father had $61,000 of medical debt that insurance wouldn't touch, a paid-off house, and a union pension of $2,180 a month. I sat in the Dover Chow Hall with a napkin and a ballpoint pen, and I did the math. I did it 3 times. It came out the same. My father was about $400 a month short, every month, until he died. In March of 2014, I set up an allotment. For anyone who wasn't in, you file a form and the Department of Defense takes part of your pay before it ever touches your account and sends it where you say. It isn't a transfer. It's a line item on your pay statement. The United States government records it. Every month? Forever. $400 a month into my father's account at Pettis County Savings. I raised it 3 times in 12 years, and I want you to look at all 3, because 2 of them were arithmetic, and 1 of them was not. In 2017, I made it $600 because the interest on the hospital paper was compounding faster than a napkin can hold. In 2020, I made it $700 because that was the year everything cost more and nothing was open. And in March of 2023, I made it $9. That last one had no napkin behind it. There was no math. The account just kept coming up short, month after month, and I assumed it was the world. Prices, insurance, the way everything gets more expensive while you're not looking. So I raised it to $900 and stopped thinking about it. The way you turn up a thermostat in a house with a window open? I have since learned what I was actually doing. For the last 6 years of it, some of what I sent my father never reached my father. For the last 3, I was raising the number to chase a hole my brother was digging. On the 1st of every month, by direct deposit, like payroll. 144 months. $93,600. My father didn't know. Why didn't I tell him? You have to understand this man. When I was 11, he came off a pole. 22 feet onto a county road. Shattered his pelvis. 3 months in a bed. My mother called my grandmother from the hospital while he was still on the gurney. He heard her doing it. I was standing right there. I was 11 years old. I had a soda in my hand, and my father said through his teeth with his pelvis in pieces, "Tell her it's nothing to speak of." The union passed a hat, $4,200. He paid back every cent of it. Took him 4 years, and he never told my mother he was doing it. I know because I found the receipts after she died. If I told my father I was sending money, he would refuse. He'd refuse politely, and he'd refuse permanently, and then he'd sell the house my mother died in to pay off a debt he should never have carried alone. So I called the bank instead. I told them not to send notices. I told them if he ever asked, call it a pension adjustment. The woman who took that call was named Doreen. Remember that. We'll come back. I was 29. I was calling from a hallway in Dover, Delaware, 40 feet from the door of a room I'm not going to describe to you. And I'd just come off a shift I'm not going to describe either. And I said to that woman, please don't let him find out. He's proud. And she said, all right, hon, and then she wrote it down. Ohio was where it got light. My phone buzzed. Aunt Deb. My mother's sister. 72, lives in Warrensburg, uses the telephone the way other people breathe. Sloan, did you hear? Your father? I heard. I'm driving. I don't understand what's happening, Dale says. What does Dale say? There was a pause, and inside the pause I heard my aunt decide to tell me the truth. He says your daddy's been taking your money. Says he's been taking the money you send home for years and hiding it, and he's not right in the head anymore, and I pulled onto the shoulder. Aunt Deb. What, honey? You know about the money. You know about the money? Well, she hesitated. Well, yes, I know. Did you tell anybody? And my aunt, the woman who held me at my mother's funeral, who mailed me cookies all the way to Kandahar, my aunt said, I told Dale. Christmas of 19. I didn't know it was a secret, sweetheart. I thought it was a nice thing. I sat on the shoulder of Interstate 70 and I didn't say anything for about 10 seconds. Because my aunt wasn't wrong. I never told her it was a secret. Saying that would have meant admitting it mattered. And if it mattered, then it wasn't free anymore. My secret leaked through kindness. It came with no instructions, because I didn't attach any. 6 months after Christmas of 2019, Dale's name went on my father's account. To help with the bills. I got to Sedalia at 8:20 that night. 16 hours and 10 minutes. The Pettis County Sheriff's Office is a 1-story brick building next to a parking lot with 7 cars in it. I'd driven past it 1,000 times as a kid. It was smaller than I remembered. Everything in Sedalia was smaller than I remembered. My father was in the hallway on a plastic chair, not in a cell. They'd let him out in the late afternoon because he wasn't a danger to anybody, and because this is Sedalia, and because Deputy Hardy has a father of his own who's 78. He had on a plaid shirt, tucked in, his church shoes. He'd gone to the bank in his church shoes. I stood in the doorway and looked at him for 3 seconds before he saw me, and I want you to understand that I have spent 12 years looking at things human beings were not built to look at, and I have never had to set my jaw the way I set it in those 3 seconds. He looked up. He didn't stand. He didn't say anything. My father raised one hand, palm out, about shoulder height, the way you wave at a truck passing on a county road. You came, he said. I came. Deputy Hardy is about 35. He isn't a bad man. This is the place in every story like this one, where they tell you the cop was lazy, or bought, or too tired to care. Hardy wasn't any of that. Hardy did everything right. That's the part that still wakes me up. He took me into a small conference room with a folding table. He opened a folder. He turned it around toward me and he talked to me in the slow, decent voice of a man trying not to hurt anybody further. Ms. Merrick, I'll be straight with you. Please. Yesterday morning, your father walked into Pettis County Savings and asked to withdraw $12,000 from an account that had been closed 6 weeks earlier. The funds went into a trust. He didn't know that. He said so. He said it over and over. And? He wouldn't leave. He got loud. He took hold of the counter. The teller called us. Hardy stopped. Ms. Merrick, I was there. He didn't touch anybody. He just wouldn't leave. He kept saying one thing. What thing? Hardy looked down at the folder. That's my money. I didn't say anything. 40 minutes, Hardy said. 40 minutes that man stood at the counter saying it was his money and nobody in that building could explain to him why it wasn't. He turned a page. Then last night, your brother filed a sworn complaint. He slid it across. I read it. Victim: Sloan M. Merrick. Suspect: Walter J. Merrick. Offense: financial exploitation. Estimated loss: $93,600. Reporting party: Dale R.R. Merrick, on behalf of victim, currently residing out of state. I read it again. My brother reported my father to the police for stealing from me. On my behalf. I have never filed anything, Ms. Merrick. Hardy said it quietly. I've got bank records showing $93,600 moving into a 74-year-old man's account over 12 years, and I can't source it. I've got a sworn complaint from immediate family. And I've got an old man. I asked 6 times, ma'am, I counted, where that money came from. What did he say? Hardy looked at me. He said, I don't know. He closed the folder 6 times. Same 3 words. You see my position? I don't have a choice. I really don't have a choice. This is where, in any other story, the narrator reaches into a jacket and produces a badge. I don't have a badge. I got out in 2016. I manage a funeral home in Dover, Delaware. I do almost exactly what I used to do, except nobody salutes anything, and nobody calls me sergeant anymore, and the only things in my wallet are a driver's license and a VA card. I had no authority to tell Deputy Hardy to do anything. I had two things. The first was the truth, and the truth was going to cost my father every single thing he believed he had earned. The second was in an ammo can, on the passenger seat of a pickup truck, 40 feet away in that parking lot. It was worth more than any lawyer in Missouri. It had been sitting in my closet for 12 years. I didn't know it was there. I wouldn't know for 4 more days. I used the wrong one first. I sat down. I looked through the glass into the hallway where my father was sitting on a plastic chair in his church clothes, with his hands on his knees the way you sit at a doctor's office. I knew what would happen if I said it. I'd known since Ohio. I'd known for 8 hours on Interstate 70. I sat in that truck and I ran the numbers the same way I ran them on a napkin in the Dover Chow Hall 12 years before. There were 2 roads. The first, I keep quiet. My father gets charged. He gets a public defender. The case falls apart in 6 months for lack of motive. But for 6 of those months, he is a 74-year-old man accused of stealing from his own daughter in a town of 22,000 people, where he has lived his entire life, where he strung the line to every house on the block. The second, I say it, he's out in an hour, and I take the only thing he has. My father believed he had stood on his own. 13 years since my mother died. $61,000 of hospital paper. He believed he'd paid it with his own 2 hands, that the union had looked after him, that he owed nobody anything. That was the man's entire estate, and I was about to burn it to keep him out of a cell. I thought about it for maybe 4 seconds. It was never a choice. I just needed 4 seconds to accept that I'd known the answer since Ohio. Deputy Hardy. Ma'am, that money isn't missing. He looked up. I sent it. He stared at me. Say again? In March of 2014, I set up a Department of Defense allotment into my father's account at Pettis County Savings, $400 a month. It escalated. When I got out, I switched it to an automatic transfer from my civilian account. 144 consecutive months, $93,600. Hardy didn't say anything. My father didn't take my money, I said. I gave it to him. Then why couldn't he? Because I never told him. Hardy sat very still. I called the bank in 2014 and told them not to let him know. Verify it. The woman I spoke to was named Doreen, and Hardy did the thing I will be grateful for the rest of my life. He didn't ask me why. He just nodded once, very small, and stood up and said, "I'll call the bank." He got to the door. Then he stopped. "Ms. Merrick." "Yes?" He really didn't know? "No." Hardy looked out into the hallway. At the old man in the church shoes. 12 years. 12 years. Yes. He nodded again, and he went, and I sat alone in a conference room with a folding table. I had just saved my father. I had 48 hours to enjoy it. They let my father go at 20 to 11 that night. Doreen Aldrich answered her home phone. She confirmed the 2014 call in 90 seconds. She said she remembered it. The complaint didn't collapse. It simply had nothing left to stand on. We walked out to the lot. March in Missouri, wind coming through your coat. My father walked slower than I remembered. Not weak, just slow, the slow of a man who climbed poles for 38 years and whose knees are now sending the bill. He didn't ask anything in the parking lot. He didn't ask anything in the truck. He didn't ask anything for the 7 minutes home, and I let it be, because I thought maybe he hadn't heard the conversation through the glass. He heard it. He heard every word. We went into the kitchen I grew up in. Same Formica table. Same rooster clock my mother bought in 1994 that everybody hated. Outside, it started to rain. Rain all week. That was the first thing my father ever wrote to me. April of 2014. A postcard with a picture of Truman Lake. 4 lines. Signed with his initials. I stood in his kitchen and listened to rain hit the roof he'd reshingled himself in 2021. And I thought, 12 years, and he never told me anything but the weather. I'd assumed that was because he had nothing to say. My father didn't sit down. He stood at the sink with his back to me, and he ran the water, and he washed his hands. He washed them a long time. Then he shut the water off and he stood there with his hands wet, and he said, without turning around, $400. Dad, 14, it was 400. Still not turning. Then 6. Then 7. Now it's 9. You heard. I heard. He reached for the dish towel on the oven handle. He dried his hands, one finger at a time, the way he does, the way I've watched him do 4,000 times. And then he said the thing I'll take to my grave. I thought the union was looking after me. I couldn't say anything. I thought. He stopped. He folded the towel in half. He folded it again. 13 years I thought I was standing on my own 2 feet. I told people that. At church. Dennis from the local asked, was I all right? And I told him I was all right. I told that man I was all right, Sloan. He hung the towel back up. He straightened it. So I lied to him, my father said. 13 years I lied to that man and I didn't even know I was doing it. Then he reached up to the shelf for a cup, and his hand opened. The cup hit the linoleum. It didn't break. It's melamine. My mother bought a set of 6 at Kmart in '94. They don't break. That's why she bought them. It bounced once, rolled half a turn, and came to rest against the table leg. My father looked at it. Then he bent down, slow, one knee popping dry, and he picked it up, and he ran the water, and he washed it, and he set it in the rack. He didn't say anything about dropping it. 74 years old, just found out somebody else paid for the last 13 years of his life, and the first thing he did was wash the cup. Nothing broke in that kitchen that night. That's the problem. If something had broken, it would have been easier. Here is what I need you to understand about my father, and I need you to understand it now because everything after this depends on it. He wasn't angry. Not for 1 second, not 1 sentence. He wasn't angry that I sent it. He wasn't angry that I hid it. He was standing in his own kitchen at 11 at night, trying to rearrange 13 years of his life into a different shape. People don't shout when that happens. People wash their hands. Dad, I'm sorry. He turned around. The dish towel's in his hand again. He hadn't reached for it. It was just in his hand, and he was looking at it, and then he looked at me. You did right, my father said. Then he went to bed. The next 48 hours were the best 48 hours in 12 years. I know how that sounds. My father had just walked out of a sheriff's office. But something had been said in that kitchen, and bad as it was the first thing said between us since my mother died. Thursday morning he fried eggs. He fried them for me and he ruined them, and he laughed about it. He showed me the roof he'd done himself. He asked about my job. My father, 74 years old, asked me about my job. I told him a little, not much. I told him I worked at a place called the Joint Personal Effects Depot. That when a soldier dies overseas, his things come through Dover. Wallet, watch, ring, letters. I told him my job was to inventory every item, clean it if it needed cleaning, and return it to the family. He listened to all of it. Then he said, "Did they thank you?" "Not much." He nodded, like that was the answer he'd expected. "No," he said. "Me neither. 38 years I put the lights up in this town. Nobody ever once thanked a light." That's the longest sentence my father ever said to me about his work. 48 hours. Then Friday the mail came. The envelope was stamped Circuit Court of Pettis County, Probate Division. It was thick. I opened it at the kitchen table while my father was out in the yard. Petition for appointment of conservator. Respondent. Walter James Merrick. Petitioner. Dale Robert Merrick. I turned past the cover, and there it was. Page 4, Section 7, Paragraph C. Evidence of inability to manage financial resources. Exhibit A. The incident report of the Pettis County Sheriff's Department. The bank. The 16th of March. That was the report my brother created by turning my father in, and under it, Exhibit B. Recorded statement of Sloan M. Merrick, the 17th of March, confirming that $93,600 was deposited into respondent's account across 144 consecutive months without respondent's knowledge, without respondent's acknowledgement, and which respondent could not account for when asked 6 times by law enforcement. I read it 3 times. Then I put the page down on the formica, and I sat very still in the kitchen I grew up in, and I understood. Dale didn't report my father to put him in jail. Dale never thought a theft charge would hold. It couldn't hold. No motive, no victim, nothing. Dale reported my father to make me talk. He knew I'd talk. He knew I did exactly what I'd say and how fast I'd say it. He'd known since Christmas of 2019, when Aunt Deb told him about her sweet niece who sent money home and never mentioned it to anybody. He didn't need proof that my father was losing his mind. He needed testimony, sworn, recorded, from a witness who could not be impeached, that for 12 years, Walter James Merrick did not know what was in his own bank account, and I handed it to him. I handed it to him in 4 seconds, in a conference room with a folding table, to keep my father out of a cell he'd have sat in one more night. My confession, the thing I protected for 144 months, the thing I burned to save him, was the bullet. I loaded it. Dale just pulled. I sat there a long time. Out in the yard, my father was raking. It's March. There are no leaves. He was raking an empty yard because his hands needed something to do. Here's the thing about my work, and it's the reason I didn't stand up and put the table through the window. At Dover, when you handle effects, there's a rule. You don't hurry. Ever. The item is already damaged. Hurrying only damages it more. There was a watch once. I won't say what year. It had burned. The crystal had run down into the face. Somebody upstream had tried to wipe it fast and took the engraving off the case back. That engraving was everything the family was ever going to get. I learned that at 24, and it is the only thing I brought out of the army intact. So I didn't put the table through the window. I stood up. I washed my coffee cup. I put the page in my bag. Then I drove to Merrick Mechanical. The shop is out on 65, next to a car wash that closed. I looked it up in the truck. Merrick Mechanical, established 2018. 4 employees in 19, 1 in 2004. None since last June. It never turned a profit, not 1 year. It ran on my money. Dale was there. He stood up when I came in. He wasn't surprised. He'd been expecting me, maybe since Tuesday, maybe since Christmas of 2019. Then he started talking. He talked for 11 minutes. I stood in the middle of a waiting room with 3 chairs and a water cooler, and I let him. He paced. He pointed at doors. He told me about the county contract that got canceled in 22, about the tech who walked out midsummer and took 2 accounts with him, about the truck he had to sell last April, the F-350, 60 months of payments, and he sold it in month 41. He used the word fair 4 times. I counted. You want to know what he did to me? Dale said. At the bank. In front of Charla Vance, who I went to high school with. 74 years old in his church shoes, hollering, "Where's my money, Dale?" Half of Sedalia standing there. He did that to me. "You're 1,000 miles away," he said. "You know who drives Dad to the eye doctor?" "Me." "Who did the roof?" I called the man. I put the deposit down. "Who sat up with him the night Duke had the seizure?" "Not you." "My father reshingled that roof himself in 2021. He showed it to me on Thursday, from the yard, with his hand up over his eyes. He was proud of it. I didn't say anything." He stopped in the middle of the floor and spread his hands. "I'm not asking anybody to thank me. I'm saying somebody had to be here, and I was here, 12 years. At Dover, they teach you something I never used outside of work until that afternoon. When a family starts talking, you don't interrupt. They aren't talking so you'll hear. They're talking because silence is the only thing worse than listening to yourself. There was a mother in Ohio who once told me about a bicycle for 40 minutes, a bicycle she'd bought her son when he was 9, and I sat there for 40 minutes and I did not say one word. Because the second I opened my mouth, she'd have to go back into the room with the box in it. So I let my brother talk for 11 minutes. He thought I was losing. Then he stopped. He looked at me, and his voice dropped. Slower, quieter, almost kind. "You know what's funny?" "No. You sent money home for 12 years and you think that makes you the good one." He said it very softly. "You're not the good one, Sloan. You were just paying not to come home." I didn't answer. Not because I was keeping my composure. Not because I was better than him. Not because I had a better line I was swallowing. I didn't answer because he was right. $900 a month is cheap. Cheaper than 4 flights a year. Cheaper than sitting in that kitchen listening to the rooster clock. Cheaper than looking at the chair my mother used to sit in. 12 years, and I had never once heard anybody say that out loud. And I need you to understand that the reason nobody had said it wasn't that nobody had thought of it. It's that nobody was cruel enough. My brother was. It's the one thing he was better at than me, and he just used it, and it landed. He took his keys and went out the back and said, without turning around, "Have your lawyer call my lawyer." The door shut, and in a waiting room with 3 chairs and a water cooler, there were 2 women left. Crystal Merrick sat at the front desk with a notebook and a pen. For 11 minutes, she never once looked up. Now she looked up. "You got here faster than I thought," she said. "You knew," I said. Not a question. "Yes. How long?" Crystal put the pen down. She's about 36. She looked tired in a way you can't perform. 6 years, she said. I didn't say anything. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. "Yell at me? Tell me what kind of person I am?" "No." "Then what?" And I opened my mouth and realized I had nothing. Because Crystal Merrick had known for 6 years and said nothing. And I had known for 12 years and said nothing. She saw it land. I know she did because she nodded once. "There it is," she said quietly. "That's the same thing I've been thinking for 6 years." "It isn't the same." "No?" Crystal tilted her head. "You stayed quiet so your father wouldn't be ashamed. I stayed quiet so my husband wouldn't be ashamed. Where's the difference? In the intention? Or in the fact that you got luckier?" I didn't answer. I still don't have an answer. 3 years. I still don't. I'm not going to pretend to you that I do. I had the petition in my bag. I took it out and set it on her desk, and I asked her the only question I'd driven out there to ask. Whose idea was the paper? Crystal looked at it a long time. She didn't touch it. "I said the word," she said. "Once. In November. At our kitchen table. I said, 'There's a thing called a conservatorship.'" She looked at her hands. "I said it the way you say a thing you're never going to do." And he wrote it down. He wrote it down. She was quiet for a second. "He asked me to type it up in February." "February," I said. "February. That petition is dated the 20th of March. "It was done in February," Crystal said. "All of it. Every page. I do the paperwork. I've done the paperwork for 8 years. That's what I am, here." She reached over and turned the pages until she got to page 4, and she put one finger on Exhibit B, and she left it there. "There was a blank line where that is," she said. "For 5 weeks. I asked him what went in it. Twice. What did he say?" Crystal took her finger off the page. "He said, 'That one fills itself.'" I stood in a waiting room with 3 chairs and a water cooler and looked at a woman with a notebook and a pen, and I understood that I was looking at myself. She keeps the records on the other side. That's the whole difference between us. She types it. I read it. Neither one of us has ever once said a word. I was at the door when Crystal said, "Sloan." I turned. "He told me you'd talk," she said. "At the sheriff's. He told me last week. He said Sloan will open her mouth inside of 5 minutes. She can't help it." She picked her pen back up. "He knows you," Crystal said. "Don't you see that? He's the only one in this family who actually does." I sat in the truck in the lot of a closed car wash and I thought about those 11 minutes. My brother had just stood in that room and explained himself, year by year. The contract, the tech, the truck. He needed me to understand. I have never explained myself to anybody in my life. I used to think that was my strength. Sitting in that truck, I started to think it might just be another way of saying I never gave anyone a chance to disagree with me. I drove back to my father's. I went through the desk drawer in his bedroom, and I found 6 years. Not financial records. Those were at the bank. I found notes. My father wrote notes to himself. Dozens. On sticky pads, on the backs of envelopes, on an old calendar. 2s. Dale says electric is paid. Check. Talk to Dale about the 600. Says I took it out. Don't remember. Ask Dale. September bill. Don't remember September. Be careful. That one was in pencil. Bigger than the others. Be careful. My father sat in that room, alone, and wrote himself the words, "Be careful," because he thought he was losing his mind and he was trying to catch himself in the act. He didn't tell anybody. Of course he didn't tell anybody. It's my father. Saturday night, I sat in the truck outside his house and did the math. A guardianship attorney in Missouri, $7,500 to $20,000, depending on complexity. This was complex. My account, $4,211. I was 41 years old. I'd worked for 22 years. No house. No savings. Nothing. I have $93,600 sitting in a trust my brother controls. I sat in the truck and I laughed. Not the good kind. Just the sound coming out. Then I reached for the ammo can on the passenger seat because I wanted to hold something of my father's. I popped the lid. 47 postcards, face down, rubber banded. I'd never recounted them. I knew the number because I knew. I lifted them out, and in the bottom of the can, in the corner, pressed flat against the olive drab by 16 years of humidity and the weight of everything I'd stacked on top of it, was a business card. I worked it loose. The paper had gone soft at the corners. Soft like cloth. Emery T. Fitch, prosecuting attorney, St. Louis County, Missouri, and on the back, in ballpoint, in handwriting I didn't recognize, if you ever need anything, anytime, anything at all. October of 2010. I was 25. I'd been at the depot 4 months. A family flew to Dover. They don't have to. Most don't. Most wait for the case to come to them. This family flew. A father, a mother, and a 19-year-old daughter. I sat with them in a room about the size of a kitchen, and I opened a folder and I read the inventory. You read it aloud, item by item. That's the procedure. People think it's cruel until they've sat in that room, and then they understand it's the only thing holding the room up. Item 17. 1 wallet, leather, brown, contents intact. Item 18. 1 photograph, water damaged, dried. Item 19. 4 letters, unmailed. I set the 4 letters on the table. They were sealed, stamped, addressed. His son had written 4 letters and sealed them and stamped them and addressed them and put them in his ruck and never walked to a mailbox. Emery Fitch looked at those 4 envelopes for a long time. Then he looked at me and he said, "Who are you?" And I said the thing I've said 400 times and still can't explain. I'm sorry it took so long. I apologized to him. His son died in Helmand and I sat there and apologized to him because the logistics took 8 weeks. He handed me the card in the parking lot. He didn't say anything. He just handed it over. I put it in an ammo can and I never used it. 16 years. He picked up on the second ring. 9 at night on a Saturday. Fitch. Sir. You won't remember me. Sloan. Merrick. I couldn't say anything. Dover. Emery Fitch said. October of 2010. You were in fatigues and you read me 19 items and you didn't stumble once. Yes, sir. Took you 16 years, he said. I figured you'd call inside of one. I wasn't going to call. I know. He exhaled. Tell me. I told him all of it. I told him all of it. It took 40 minutes. He didn't interrupt once, the silence of a man who has listened to 1,000 people tell him things and knows that interrupting is the fastest way to ruin it. When I finished, he was quiet about 5 seconds. Then he said, "You're arguing the wrong sentence. Sir? You're trying to prove your father isn't demented. Nobody said he was demented. You said that word. They didn't." Paper shifting. Missouri Revised Statutes, Chapter 475. They don't have to prove he's crazy. They have to prove he is unable to manage his financial resources. That's a different sentence, on a different page, and you've been fighting the wrong one for 4 days. I sat in the truck and felt my face go hot. Then what do I prove? That he managed exactly the resources he knew about, Emery said, and the part he didn't know about that isn't incapacity. That's somebody hiding it from him. He paused. Do you understand what that means, Ms. Merrick? Yes. Say it. I looked through the windshield at the house I grew up in, where an old man was asleep who had believed for 13 years that he'd stood on his own. It means I have to prove I deceived him. I said. And that I was good at it. Yes, Emery Fitch said. You're going to stand in front of a judge and prove you are a very, very good liar. That's your whole case. There is no other case. I sat with that for about 30 seconds. Will you take it? I asked. I retired 8 years ago. I know. I don't take cases. I know. I don't take cases. I know. Silence. Then Emery Fitch said, and his voice changed completely. Ms. Merrick, 16 years ago you sat in a room at Dover and you handed me 4 letters my son never got to mail. I have read them 900 times. I still read them. I read one this morning. I closed my eyes. Now I'm going to ask you something, he said. How many postcards did your father send you? 47. 47, he repeated. That man walked to a mailbox 47 times. I didn't say anything. How many have you read? I've read them all. No. Very quiet. I didn't ask how many you glanced at. I asked how many you've read. I sat in a pickup truck with 47 postcards in my lap and I couldn't answer him. That's what I thought, Emery Fitch said. Go read them, then call me back. I read them in the truck, from 20 to 10 at night until 4 in the morning. Not in the house. I couldn't do it in the house, because he was in the house. I took the rubber band off. I sorted them by postmark. I did the thing I'd done 400 times with other people's belongings and had never once done with my own. I made an inventory. Item 1. Postcard, Truman Lake. Postmark Sedalia, Missouri, the 14th of April, 2014. Sloan. Rain all week. Duke had ticks. Got him off. Dad. W.M. Item 2. Postcard, Missouri State Fair. Postmark the 2nd of August, 2014. Fair this week. Didn't go. Legs fine. Dad. W.M. I read the first 10 and saw nothing. Then I read them again from the top. And I saw it. My father has a phrase. He uses it for everything. He's used it my whole life, and I never once heard it the way you don't hear the clock in your own house. Nothing to speak of. That's the phrase he uses to tell you there is something very much to speak of. 22 feet onto a county road with his pelvis in 4 pieces, and my mother on the phone to my grandmother and him on the gurney. Tell her it's nothing to speak of. That is the entire vocabulary that man has for suffering. And he said it to me on the telephone at 3:41 in the morning from a holding room in his church shoes. 13 hours in. I heard an old man being brave. He wasn't being brave. He was filing a report. I looked for the phrase in 47 postcards. It appears 11 times. Card 29, postmarked the 18th of September, 2020. Sloan. Had a funny week. Nothing to speak of. Duke's good. Dad. W.M. Card 32, postmarked the 7th of March, 2021. Sloan. Funny week. Nothing to speak of. Weather's nice. Dad. W.M. Card 35, postmarked the 22nd of November, 2021. Sloan. Got mixed up on some bills. Nothing to speak of. Dad. W.M. 11 times, and every one of them after September of 2020. At 2 in the morning, I pulled up the statements Hardy had sent me, and I put the 2 things side by side. Card 29, postmarked the 18th of September, 2020. Cash withdrawal, $600. The 15th of September, 2020, 3 days. Card 32, postmarked the 7th of March, 2021. Withdrawal, $700. The 3rd of March, 4 days. Card 35, the 22nd of November. Withdrawal, $750. The 19th of November, 3 days. I sat in that truck and I did all 11. 11 out of 11. Not one of them more than 4 days. Every time my brother took money out of my father's account, my father got confused. And every time my father got confused, he walked to the mailbox at the end of the driveway and sent his daughter a postcard. He didn't call. He didn't ask for help. He didn't tell Aunt Deb or Dennis at the local or a doctor or anyone. He wrote his daughter that he'd had a funny week, nothing to speak of. My father documented his own exploitation. 47 times, 11 of them were direct evidence. He documented it in the only language he had, and he mailed it 1,050 miles to the one person alive who could read it. And she filed it in an ammo can. I sat in the truck until it got light. Then I did two things. The first, I looked up Chapter 604 of the Domestic Mail Manual. A postmark is a timestamp. It's applied by a federal agency at a specific facility on a specific date. I didn't make it. My father didn't make it. It cannot be backdated, altered, or bought. My father's 47 postcards carry 47 stamps of the United States government. The second, I drove to Pettis County Savings at 9 o'clock Monday morning and asked for Doreen Aldrich. She's 61. She's worked at that bank 34 years. She looked at me across the counter and said, "You're Walt's girl." "Yes, ma'am." "Sit down, hon." She took me into a small room in the back and shut the door and said, "I've been waiting 12 years for that phone call." Then she opened a file drawer, the old 4-drawer steel kind nobody uses anymore, and took out an index card. The paper had gone yellow. Merrick, W.J. Account 4471. March of 2014. Daughter, Sloan, Army, called. Department of Defense allotment, $400 a month. Request, no notices. If customer asks, describe as pension adjustment. Note, girl was crying. Said he's proud. D. Elected that card a long time. Why did you keep it? I asked. Doreen Aldrich shrugged. I keep everything, she said. 34 years. They told me to digitize it all and pitch the drawers. I told them fine. She patted the steel. Then I didn't. She slid the card across the table. On, Doreen said. You know how many people called me in 34 years and asked me to hide money from their father? No, ma'am. 1, she said. Exactly 1. I mailed a copy of that card to a retired prosecutor in St. Louis that afternoon. He called me back Wednesday and said one word. Good, that's all. Not what it was for. Not where it went. He said good? And then he asked me what the weather was doing in Sedalia, and I told him, and he hung up. I assumed he was being polite. He wasn't being polite. Emery Fitch was not once, in 5 weeks, being polite. People are going to tell you I changed that night. I didn't. I did exactly what I have done for 22 years. I made an inventory. I put it in order. I logged every item, and I read it aloud, and I did not hurry, because the item was already damaged, and hurrying only damages it more. I didn't grow. I didn't learn a lesson. I did not become a better person in that pickup truck. I just pointed the same tool in a different direction. The only difference was that this time, the name on the folder was my father's. The hearing was the 22nd of April, 11 in the morning, Courtroom 2, Circuit Court of Pettis County, before Judge Marion Oyalaran. It didn't rain that day, I noticed, because I had started noticing. The room was smaller than my father's kitchen. I'm not being figurative. I measured it by eye, and it was smaller. There were 7 people in it, no press, nobody filming, nothing. Here's what you need to know about these things. They don't happen in a big paneled courtroom with columns. They happen in a room with gray commercial carpet and an air handler that ticks. They take your father's life in a room like that on a Wednesday morning, and they're finished before lunch. Dale sat at the other table. He was in a suit. I'd never seen my brother in a suit. He didn't look at me. For an hour and 40 minutes, he did not look at me once. His attorney spoke for 15 minutes. He was good. He never said the word dementia. Emery had been right. He just repeated one phrase, calmly, kindly, almost with sorrow, unable to manage his financial resources. He entered Exhibit A, the sheriff's report. He entered Exhibit B. He read my statement aloud. I sat and listened to a stranger read back the words I'd said to save my father, and I watched my father hear them a second time, and that was the worst minute of my life. I have stood in rooms at Dover I am not going to tell you about. It is still the worst minute of my life. Then Dale's attorney sat down, and Judge Oyalaran looked at our table and said, Respondent? Emery Fitch stood up. 68 years old, gray suit. No briefcase, just a cardboard envelope. Your Honor, I represent Mr. Merrick pro bono. Your Honor, I represent Mr. Merrick pro bono. I'll be brief. He set the envelope on the table. Petitioner must prove my client is unable to manage his financial resources. I'm not going to argue that he was unaware of $93,600 in his account. He was unaware. That is true, and we concede it. I hadn't known he was going to do that. He never told me. I found out the way the other table found out. I watched opposing counsel's head come up, and my own stomach went out from under me, and Emery Fitch did not look at me once. The only question before this court, he said, is why he was unaware. He opened the envelope, and the answer is because his daughter hid it from him. Deliberately. Systematically. For 144 months. And she was very good at it. Then he called me. I swore in. And I sat in the witness chair of courtroom 2, 12 feet from my father, and did the thing I had driven 1,050 miles to avoid doing. Emery didn't ask whether I was kind. He asked how I did it. Ms. Merrick, in March of 2014, did you telephone Pettis County Savings? Yes. What did you request? I asked them not to send my father notices. I asked that if he inquired it be described as a pension adjustment. Did you know that was a misrepresentation? Yes. How long did you maintain it? 12 years. Did you correspond with your father by mail? Yes. He sent me 47 postcards. And 47 postcards, did you ever mention money? No. Not once. Not once. Not once. Did you tell anyone? My aunt. Once. In 2016. Did you ask your aunt to keep it secret? And here's the part I had to say. And Emery had warned me he'd ask. And I'd told him to ask it. No. Why not? I looked at my hands. Because if I asked her to keep it secret, that would mean it mattered, I said. And if it mattered, it wasn't free anymore. The room was quiet. Ms. Merrick, Emery said softly, if your father were 50 years old, in perfect health, with no impairment whatsoever, would he have found out? No. How can you be certain? Because I designed it so he wouldn't, I said. I work with records. That's my profession. I know what a document has to look like for a person not to read it. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I did it carefully, and I did it for 12 years, and I did it well. I looked up. My father was looking at me. He didn't find out, I said, because I was better. Then Emery Fitch took 2 things out of the cardboard envelope. The first was an index card. It had gone yellow at the edges. It had sat 12 years in a steel file drawer that a woman had been ordered to throw out. He handed it up. Judge Oyleran read 6 lines. She read the last one twice. Note. Girl was crying. Said he's proud. Your Honor, Emery said, that card was written in March of 2014 by a teller in Sedalia, Missouri, who was instructed to destroy her paper files and declined to. It is not in my client's handwriting. It is not in my witness's handwriting. It was created 12 years before anybody in this room had a theory about my client's mind, and it establishes one fact. The concealment in this case was designed at a distance by a professional, and it was designed to work on a man in perfect health. He set the second thing on the ledge. These are the postcards. He didn't say anything while she read. He just let her read. He just let her read. Nobody in that room moved. Dale's attorney set his pen down on the table and did not pick it back up. My brother didn't move at all. He had not looked at me in an hour and 40 minutes, and he did not look at me then. He looked at the postcards. 11 minutes. In a room with 7 people and a ticking air handler, a woman read 12 years of 4-line postcards from a man she'd never met. Then she set them down. And she said, Mr. Fitch, is this correlation accurate? Yes, Your Honor. 11 instances, none more than 4 days after a withdrawal. The postmarks are applied by the United States Postal Service. They cannot be altered. Judge Oyleran looked down at the postcards a while longer. Then she said the sentence I'll hear in my head until the day I die. Mr. Merrick did not lose the ability to track his own resources. He tracked them with considerable precision. He simply had no one to report to. She denied the petition. 11:42 in the morning. The whole thing took an hour and 42 minutes. Nobody applauded. Nobody was handcuffed. The air handler kept ticking. Judge Oyleran struck her gavel once and said we're adjourned and stood and went out the back door, and that was it. 7 people started gathering papers in a room smaller than my father's kitchen. We went out into the hall. The hallway of the Pettis County Courthouse is tile, and every sound comes back at you, so you hear everything. Dale was standing by the window. Nobody was with him. Crystal hadn't come. His attorney had already gone. My father walked past him. My father didn't say anything. My father didn't say anything. My father didn't stop. My father didn't look at him. I have spent 3 years thinking about those 3 seconds, and I still believe it is the cruelest thing I have ever watched one human being do to another, and I still believe it was right. That night, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank and canceled the recurring transfer. It took 9 seconds. That's all. That's everything I did. I didn't sue anybody. I didn't ask for $1 back. I didn't call a newspaper, didn't post anything anywhere, didn't write anyone a letter. I just stopped paying. Here's the ledger, and I'm going to read it the way I read an inventory, because it's the only way I know. The conservatorship petition, denied, with prejudice. The Pettis County prosecuting attorney charged Dale Robert Merrick with financial exploitation of an elderly person, Section 570.145, and filing a false report, Section 575.08. He pled 4 years probation, restitution, $61,400, some of it mine, some of it my father's pension, all of it money. Everyone in that room knew he would never pay. I want you to look at that number, because I've looked at it for 3 years. The hospital debt my mother left my father was $61,000. My brother took $61,400, $400 more than the thing I set out to fix. And $400 a month was where I started. I don't know what to do with that. I've never known what to do with that. I'm just telling you it's in the file. Merrick Mechanical closed the following February. It never turned a profit. It ran on $900 a month of mine, and when I stopped, it lasted 10 more months. Crystal left in September. Not dramatically, she just went. I don't know where she is. I hope she's all right. I still don't have an answer to the question she asked me in that waiting room, and I don't think I ever will. I opened the letter from the VA in July. It had been in a drawer for 9 years, 10%. I filed the paperwork the same afternoon. It took 11 minutes. 9 years in a drawer. 11 minutes. That's me. That's the whole diagnosis, and it isn't my back. My father revised his will in May. Took 20 minutes. He didn't say anything about it beforehand, and he didn't say anything about it after. He went and did it and came home and fried eggs. But none of that is the sentence. The sentence is this: my father never asked about him again. Not once. 3 years. The man who wrote 47 postcards to a daughter 1,000 miles away. The man who walked to that mailbox 47 times to tell somebody he'd had a funny week had nothing left to write to his son. That's the sentence. It isn't in any file. I moved back to Sedalia in June. There's a funeral home on Broadway that needed a manager. I do the same work I've always done. Nobody salutes anything. I live with my father. We're fine. We eat at 6 because he eats at 6. Duke died last winter. We buried him in the corner of the yard. We don't talk much. I need you to understand that isn't a failure. That's how the two of us are assembled. You don't fix that at 44 and 77. You work with what you have. That August, I sat at the kitchen table while my father was out in the yard, and I took out a postcard. I bought it at the drugstore. Truman Lake. The same picture as card number 1. I wrote, Dad. I've been sending money since March of 2014. I should have told you. I was afraid you'd say no. You would have said no. I'd do it again. Sloan. I put a stamp on it. Outside it was raining. Of course it was raining. I opened the door and I walked out to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. 40 steps, I've counted. And I did not run. I need you to understand that. 40 steps through August rain in Missouri, and I didn't run, because running would have meant I was trying to make it faster, and I had spent 12 years making everything faster and easier and quieter, and I was done. I put the card in, and I put the little flag up. My father was standing under the carport awning, 50 feet away, holding a rake. He watched me do it. He didn't say anything. He didn't go inside, either. He stood there under the awning, in the rain, and waited for me to walk all 40 steps back. 2 days later it came, 40 steps out and 100 miles to the sorting facility in Kansas City and 100 miles back and 40 steps in. 2 days to travel 40 feet. My father got the mail at 11, the way he does. He sat down at the kitchen table 3 feet from me and he read it. I sat there and watched my father read a postcard I had written while I was sitting in front of him. He read it twice. Then he set it down on the formica. Then he stood up and he went into the bedroom and he opened the desk drawer. The drawer with the notes in it. The drawer with "Be careful" written in pencil. And he took out a pen. He wrote to me for the first time in September. The 48th. It went 40 steps out and 200 miles and 40 steps in, and it took 2 days. And I took it out of the mailbox on a Thursday afternoon, and I read it standing in the middle of the driveway in the sun. It said, "Sloan. Had a funny week. Something to speak of. Tell you at supper. Dad." At 6 that evening he told me, "I'm not going to tell you what he said. That belongs to him. I'll tell you only this. It took 40 minutes, and I didn't interrupt once, because an old man in St. Louis taught me that interrupting is the fastest way to ruin it." People ask me if I regret it. I don't know how to answer that, because the question assumes there's another version of me, one who said it out loud, right at the start, in March of 2014, and I've never met her. I don't know what she looks like. But I did learn one thing, and I'm going to say it plainly exactly once, because I haven't said anything plainly this whole time. Kindness you hide isn't kindness. It's a loan you force on somebody without telling them. And one day somebody will find that loan and start charging interest on it, and you won't be the one who pays. My father sat 13 hours in the dark because I was decent, and I was quiet. I still believe I did the right thing. I also know he paid for it. Both of those are true at the same time. I've stopped trying to pick one. People want to call the rest of it revenge. I want to be careful with that word, so here is the whole of it. I logged into a bank on a Wednesday night and I clicked one button, sitting on a bed in my socks. It took 9 seconds. The greatest revenge isn't burning a man's shop down. It's declining, quietly one Wednesday, to keep paying his gas bill. And I'm done being an arrangement. That's the only promise I've made anybody, and I'll say it here so it's on the record. I am not a line item. I am not a wire transfer. I am not a nice thing that happens to somebody on the 1st of the month from 1,000 miles away. I'm his daughter. Those were never the same thing, and I spent 12 years pretending I couldn't tell them apart. So if you're going to do something for somebody, do it in front of them. Let them look at it. Let them say no to you. You are allowed to be told no. That isn't the failure. That's the whole transaction. We live in the same house now. There's a mailbox at the end of the driveway. 40 steps. It takes 2 days. We use it anyway. People hear the name of this story and think it means nobody found out. It doesn't mean that, he told me. 47 times, in 4 lines, in the only language he had. He told me from a holding room at 3:41 in the morning with his church shoes on, and I had it in my ear before the sun came up. I heard an old man being brave. So if there's somebody in your life who keeps telling you it's nothing to speak of, somebody quiet, somebody who'd sit 13 hours in the dark rather than bother you, send them this story. They will never once ask you to, and then go read whatever they've already sent you. The card on the refrigerator. The message you scrolled past. The 4 lines about the weather. It's in there. It's been in there the whole time, 12 years, and nobody knew. Because nobody read it.